the second half.
Here comes Gooden gonna score the 2 and 1.
Full drive inside. Stop. Hang on a pivot. Turnaround jump shot is good.
Jordan Battle with a nice spin move. Kicks it down low. Fardaws, Big Maple with the finish.
What's up, everybody? It is another episode of the Straight All-WAC podcast. We are here at the hashtag Go UVU week. As you can see, I got a lot of grief from a head coach that I spoke to earlier this week. So I've got my UVU flag. Mark Madsen, I hope you're watching this episode, wearing my Utah Valley gear. And we're going to bring in Utah Valley women's basketball head coach Dan Nielson. Dan, how you doing this morning?
Doing good. Glad to see, I saw the little clip of you and Mark, so glad to see you took his advice and got the UVU stuff up there.
I want to say for the fans watching this, if you want your team's flag up here, you better send me one, because until then, I'm going to have the Utah Valley flag up here. So, Dan, I want to, we're gonna basically point out the big elephant in the room with your squad. 4 of your top 5 starters gone.
Yeah.
Josie to Louisville, that was kind of a late transfer this offseason. Megan Jensen, now at Southern Utah. Maria Carvalho up at Utah State now, and Madison Grange, at South Dakota. I mean, that's a lot to lose in a span of a couple months, especially with what could have been had returned.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting summer. We had, 3 of those 4 guys graduated, and I know had all been thinking about other things. Anyway, and you look at our conference, the best teams right now. Even out recruiting, P5 coaches said it like, hey, we look at you guys like you're AAA. Cal Baptist losing Harper to Purdue, Stephen F. Austin losing Fisher to Michigan State. And then my kids leaving. I think the thing definitely that made it harder was the timing of it. I'm glad to see that rule change where you're either in or you're not going in by a certain day.
Right.
Because when those last 2 went in, there was on average maybe 4 or 5 kids a week going in the portal, so we couldn't replace them. So that was hard, but that's the nature of the business, the nature of being at a mid-major level. And what I've told my team, what I've told my coaches is it's no different than when we showed up here. When we showed up here, Josie was averaging 4 points a game, and Maddie was averaging 5 points a game, and Maria had a negative assist to turnover ratio, and and those guys all developed, and so now we do that again, and we develop our kids, and really excited about some of our new players and players that sat out last year, like Jaden Vaifanua, transfer from Wyoming. Sat out last year. Mayafoa, who tore ACL in summer workouts last year and has looked really good so far this year. So, at this level, that's what you do. You develop players and you surprise people. I think our first year we were picked 6th, I want to say, maybe, in the league, and we ended up finishing 2nd. We just get back to work and go surprise some people.
How is it for you, too, knowing that you're going to get to play against your former point guard when you play Utah State, or that the fact that you get, your squad gets to go up against, Megan Jensen when you face Southern Utah twice now as conference foes? I mean, is that right? That's an interesting dynamic, especially the interconference transfer.
Yeah. No, it obviously, I'm sure the girls of it, there's relationships there and that they'll get, excited about that. But the bigger thing is more the state matchups. I love that we play those games. We make that a priority to play those games. And obviously now with SUU in our league, it's even more fun. But yeah, I'm sure the girls will have a little bit of, extra something with those, a little extra motivation. But the bigger thing to me is, it's good to beat Utah State and good to beat SUU in recruiting. So probably spend less time worrying about those guys and more time, trying to beat those guys. So we've been lucky and been successful against both of them in the last couple of years, and so hopefully we can keep that going.
I know that we'll get more into the roster a little bit. I want to ask you about the size. How do you replace the size that you had with Josie and with Megan? That's we were talking that we've talked to other coaches on the women's side in the league, and they were talking about the size and how they're happy that Josie's gone because they don't have to deal with that anymore.
Right.
How do you combat that on your roster this year?
You won't be as big. There's a reason why Josie was so good. there was nobody else like her other than, who is it? Tarleton's got a big that's her size, but I think, she wasn't maybe quite as far along in her development of her game as Josie. But other than that, nobody really had that size. But people, tried to combat that with quickness and athleticism. And so there was pluses and minuses with it. Same with Meg. Meg's really crafty player, and I'm sure she'll be good for Tracy down at SUU. But like I said, I mentioned Jaden already, and she's 6'1", 6'2". Shay's healthy, which is nice. We missed her last year and would have helped. She's not the biggest post, but her and Jaden's ability to shoot. Same with Mayafoa, who I mentioned. Those guys' ability to shoot really changes things compared to kind of how we were in the past with our bigs. We're able to spread it out a little bit more, and some of the stuff we run, you have to worry about different aspects. But it'll be no different than what we've done in the past. We try and find the mismatches in the post, and we try and spread you out a little bit, and we'll continue to do that. So making progress there.
You're from Utah. You probably watched the Jazz. You saw how the Jazz get beat in the playoffs when teams pull Rudy Gobert out of the paint. Is that kind of what you're seeing? Is the game changes a little bit, that you got to have a 4 or 5 that can take somebody off the dribble from the perimeter, or maybe knock down a perimeter shot? I know that's a men's game versus a women's game, but it seems like that's kind of what you were just kind of talking about a little bit.
No, it's really similar. And I will say I've been in Utah long enough. You would think I am from Texas. I am a Mavericks fan. So I enjoyed the dismantling of the Jazz last year. But yeah, that's what teams tried to do to us with our size last year. We'll run a lot of the same stuff we did in the past, but we have added a few new things to take into account. We're a much better shooting team this year on the whole. People that have improved, plus some of our new people, and then the fact that our bigs are better shooters than maybe what we had in the past from the outside can really, look to open up the floor a little bit more. But our principles aren't going to change a whole lot. When I took the job, I still remember talking to a couple coaches that their teams are no longer in the league and saying, boy, Josie's really big, but it's too bad she can't do X, Y, and Z. And we just got to work with her. And by the end, has proven now any team in the country would have taken her. And so, at our level, we're no different than anybody else, talking to Jared at CBU, talking to Mark at CNF Austin, like you just get back to work and you develop kids that, you got for a reason in the first place. And if there's one thing we've proven is we can develop kids, multiple, all conference kids over the last few years, and kids that when we got here weren't putting up those numbers. And so we just get back to work with those guys. And I am confident we'll be much like our first year. We'll be a lot better than I think people expect. But it'll be a fun process to see where we can go. We've already improved so much. Having our foreign trip this year was really nice. Being able to get a jump start with extra practices in the summer, and really seeing what this team is capable of. Kind of had some wiggle room to test things out and say, boy, that really works well, or boy, that really doesn't work. We can't do that. And so I think we're a lot farther ahead in that process of kind of molding this team into what they're capable of. So
I want to, before Daryl gets into that foreign trip, because I know he's got questions for you about it, I want to ask you, now you're in your what was it, your 4th season?
Yeah, this will be our 4th year. Yep.
And nothing against Josie or Madison or Maria. Those were recruits that stayed at Utah Valley when you took over the job.
Right.
Now you're kind of getting your squad, your recruits in. What's the difference in goal there? With regard to that, and is there? I know that you're a man-to-man coach. I know we've talked a lot about that. Like, what's it like to have your recruits in now, people that you've watched for a long time that you, got on campus, kind of like you were mentioning?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways with those guys you mentioned, they were a big part in our growth in our program. And, when we took over, we told them, we said, we understand if you want to go, but we'd like for you to stay. We thought they were good players, and they were. And they kind of, what we told them is, hey, if you stay, you're our kids, and we're going to take care of you. And that's what we did. And really proud of the fact that, 3 of those guys graduated and got their degree from UVU. But it's not a whole lot different. I think with our level, being in the WAC, it's finding kids that are kind of the diamond in the rough, as much as if I had a nickel for every time a parent or kid said, we're not chasing the biggest name, and then as soon as a bigger name comes along, they go there, I'd be a pretty rich guy. But you find those guys and you mold them. And so sometimes you don't get exactly what would be perfect for your system or for this or that. And that's where I think our league is really fun. You look across the board, not everybody just gets like plug and play kids. You know, if you're at a big name school and say, this is my style, you can go pick the best kid playing that style and get them. For us, you know, all the coaches here are really creative, and that's actually pretty fun. Year to year, you may think you've got a team figured out. You don't, because they're creative and they change and do some different stuff. And so it's the same with us. We're going to primarily play man-to-man. We do have some length and some guard spots we haven't had for a while that maybe we can mix in a little bit more press or mix up some zone. But, you know, we'll keep our similar principles and then get creative with the other stuff. And, you know, I'm sure my team gets tired of it when I'm scheming and always trying to try things, but that's what's fun about the game.
Absolutely. Daryl, chime in here.
Morning, Dan.
Hey, Daryl.
You talked about that Europe trip. Just how helpful was it for you guys to see them on the floor in a game situation? Because you're looking at basically a new group, you know, 4 of the 5 starters gone, a whole heck of a lot of your scoring gone from last year. So just talk about how valuable that was as a teaching tool to get some film and, you know, some, you know, in-game situation film.
Yeah. Like I, you know, mentioned, is super valuable. And really with those trips, a lot of times it's the extra practices are nice, extra time prior to the trip. But no, it was really good to get on the court. And in Europe, it's every coach will tell you it's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. You know, you schedule these games and sometimes you show up and you're like, boy, that's a good team and they're well coached. And sometimes maybe not so much the case. And we got a little bit of both. But it was good though to see players that, you know, we'd recruited and either have been injured or didn't get playing time because they had good players in front of them, be able to kind of validate, hey, yeah, they're here for a reason and they're doing some pretty good stuff. And so, you know, it's like a lot of those Europe trips, a little bit sloppy at times, but some really good moments where you could see what we could build into. And so we came away from that with a lot of confidence, not because we win. I think everybody goes over there and wins their games, you know, but mainly from we were able to play a style that we wanted to play while still defending really pretty well. So
is it harder to prepare a team for that trip because of the fact that you're probably playing those games under FIBA rules as opposed to NCAA, which is 24 shot versus 30 and
right,
water lane and all those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of fun. You know, we used our extra practices and played with those rules and put 24 seconds on the shot clock, which our girls all did joke around. Those extra 6 seconds make a big difference. You know, and as a coach who likes to kind of go after mismatches later in the clock, I definitely had to give up a little bit of all of us coaches want control, had to give up a little bit of that, but it was good because, you know, kind of gave them some freedom they maybe don't always have to make those mistakes where I told them beforehand, I said, this is just about getting better. If we go and win them all or lose them all, I really don't care as long as I feel like we're progressing. And that's what we definitely got out of it. And then obviously, you know, just the time together, the bonding. This team, I would say, is the most like 1 through 15 connected team we've had. We've sort of had, not in any negative way, but in the past, we definitely had kind of hey, this is the older group that's been here for a while and used to these type things. And then the newer kids, and there was maybe a little bit of a, not negative, but a divide just, you know, in age and all that. So this year and that trip, I think really helped with that connection. And I think you're seeing it help us on the court.
I love that thought. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school playing baseball, and we had a bunch of seniors that thought that they like deserved respect, even though like they weren't the best or best leaders or whatever. And so I like that thought about the rift between the older, you know, the players have been there longer, maybe the newcomers. Like that's an interesting dynamic that happens on a team.
For sure. And, you know, it also, you know, it's kind of a mentality. And I guess thinking back to your question, Kyle, with our team, maybe the biggest thing in our recruiting that's different, maybe in what you see, is more a mentality. I mean, it matters when you recruit kids that have won state titles or on a club team that really goes out there and just runs people off the court. Like really successful people, when they have a mentality of, no, we're going to be good, being okay is not an option. Or you have a lot of players that are like, they want that pressure. They want to take it to another level. In the WAC, there's not a lot of teams, on the outside that would expect us to say, hey, we want to go win a tournament game. That might sound kind of crazy. I mean, Stephen F. Austin's proven it's possible. They should have won last year. But definitely a little bit different mentality than maybe some of the guys we've had in the past, where they want that pressure. It's not that they want other people to do it and they're just a part of it. They want to be that person. So, it's different, and it's easy to say that till you get into real games and those situations. But we have more of those people now with that mentality than we've probably had in the past.
Dan, I want to go back to the 2021 NCAA tournament appearance. Do you feel like you guys are still riding some of the buzz or wave that created on the recruiting trail? First tournament appearance in the history of the program and all those sorts of things?
To some extent, that definitely some people notice it. But I've always been, really out in front on that. Like, that was an amazing experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. But at the same time, like, Cal Baptist deserved to be there. They should have been there. That was one of the best runs by a mid-major team I've ever seen. And Jared did an awesome job and had some really, really good players. Doesn't mean I wasn't thrilled for our girls, but I've been a little hesitant to take credit there. You got to win the games. But I think the biggest thing, Daryl, where we've really been able to gain traction is the kind of two areas. Number one is in recruiting, we try and be really real with who we are. Those relationships, every coach says it, but I do feel like we have an interesting dynamic where we had some staff turnover, but still I've got people I've known for a long, long time and have different backgrounds, different experiences. And the one thing we hear from parents all the time is just how refreshing it is when they talk to us that we're different than other staffs and our honesty. But then you look at the black and white of it. We've gotten better every year. You look at our players, and when we say we develop players, we're not just saying that. You look at their numbers and they've developed. You look at our wins and losses. We've won more games every year. And if you go deeper dive into the numbers, we've played a harder schedule every year I've been here. We've had higher net ranking wins every year. And so, between those two things, between just being who you are and being real with that and showing you can back up what you say you're going to do, we found we're having some good success there and getting indoors we probably wouldn't have beforehand. So definitely excited about where we're going with it. So
I want to go back to that AAA comment about, where you got players going to bigger schools or whatever at certain points. That's got to be kind of a recruiting tool for you as well. Like to say, hey, we're developing players that bigger teams want. Like, I mean, Josie going to Louisville, I guess is how you say it, right? I mean,
it depends on where you're from in the country. We'll accept all answers here.
And Josie going to a high major in Utah, or not Josie, Maria going to Utah State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that it just has to say something to players that, look, we can develop you into good players that other bigger teams will want. Not that you want them to go, but like,
right.
That's kind of a sign that you're doing something right with your players.
For sure. And it's kind of you hit it on the head, Kyle. It's a double-edged sword where, when you invest that much time and effort into people, there's no question it kind of hits you in the heart when they leave. But that's also kind of the way things are going now. I had all those kids in here saying nothing but great things about us and had their different reasons that they felt like they needed something different. So you hate to see that, but because that's become the culture, it's almost seen as when your players are doing that, these parents we're talking to and players we're talking to, I haven't talked to anybody that sees that as a negative where they're like, oh man, you've got these 3 seniors that left. They've actually all brought up, I've had more people bring up Josie going to Louisville, as a positive in recruiting than I ever thought, because, the kind of old school way is you don't ever want to lose your kids, which you don't, but, I can't be stuck in the mud. That's kind of the nature of how this goes now. People transfer left and right. I mean, heck, in football right now, all these teams are getting to their 4th game and all of a sudden you got their starting quarterbacks are transferring. So, you can either get mad about it or embrace it and make the most out of it. And we don't really have a choice. Got to go with the second option there.
Absolutely. Daryl, did you have something? I saw you come off mute for a minute.
Looking at the conference this year, Southern Utah and UTA coming in, obviously we got a lot tougher last year. The road gets a lot tougher this year with those two coming in. Just talk about how this conference has grown and developed over the last couple of years with all these additions, and where you expect kind of the WAC to settle into in terms of the mid-major pantheon of conferences, the Colonial, the Summit,
right,
the Big West, the WC.
Yeah, I really think, you can look at the numbers and metrics of it. We've moved up in all the, measurable ratings, but UTA is a heck of a team, really good. And they lost a lot of people too. One of their better players transferred late to Texas Tech, had some kids leave, but returned their best player and got a couple great transfers in themselves. SUU, Tracy does a fantastic job down there, which I love. I love when the state gets better and better and makes it more fun. And I think it just increases the level of talent in the state because more kids want to play. But yeah, from where we were 2 years ago in the conference to now, adding the Texas schools, then adding UTA, SUU this year, I really see us in the WAC legitimately kind of settling into in the West. We could be, the best mid-major conference out there. And I know that might sound funny with, the West Coast Conference involved. I think Gonzaga is always going to be kind of that oddball that doesn't quite fit. But with BYU going to the Big 12, I really think that there's room for us to continue to grow both on the men's and women's side. You look at some of the wins our teams have gotten. You look at who we're competing with. I think that's really exciting. And, we've spent a lot of time as a conference trying to be realistic, but still increase kind of the visibility of us. And so, on the women's side, we talk all the time. It might not be realistic to say, hey, we're gonna get an auto bid into the NCAA tournament quite yet, but I do think it's realistic to push for an extra bid into the NIT, into the WNIT, or get multiple teams into the WBI, and continue to grow that visibility and help people to realize that we're a really good league with really good teams.
Dan, I want to ask you about your schedule. No BYU this year. Is that a culmination of your mentor Jeff Judkins stepping down at BYU, or is it just a hiatus for maybe a year or two?
No, I mean, we'll definitely, with them being down the street, definitely, always an option, and got some things in the works in the next couple of years. This year, we tried to work on it with the old staff, and dates didn't work. And then, with Judd leaving, we just kind of moved on from that. We did last year. We haven't played them here. We didn't play them last year. We scrimmaged them instead. It was an easy trip over there to scrimmage them. But like I've mentioned before, I like playing the in-state teams, and I appreciate their willingness to play us. We're playing Utah again this year, which really respect Lynn and those guys and what they've built up there. Especially, last year we probably scared them more than they thought that we would. We were up with, I think, 2 or 3 minutes to go in the game, but just appreciate that. I think it's great for the state and great for the game. And
yeah. And you get Utah State and Weber State. So you're playing 3 of the 4 Division I schools that aren't in the WAC. And then you got 2 against Utah Tech, 2 against Southern Utah. I mean, like you said, I love the in-state games. I'm an advocate.
And for women's basketball, I think it's about visibility. I think it's about getting the community involved. You might not have the natural fan engagement, but I think when you get the community involved, where they maybe know people on both teams, where you can get that growth. And the more people we get to bring their girls to the games, get them out to the games, and have them see what a great family environment it is, and build some of those rivalries, nothing bad is going to come out of that. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of playing those guys instead of playing another kind of random Big Sky school or Big West school. I'd rather go after those rivalry games. They might hurt a little more when you lose, but they feel a little better when you win. So,
and one last question about your schedule here as we close out.
Yeah,
you start WAC play, you get that home game against Grand Canyon like right off the bat. I know that students won't be back on campus, but 2 questions about that. First off, how do you like the fact you're opening up against Grand Canyon, who, I mean, they're usually right there at the mix
Oh,
for
yeah.
the regular season tournament title. And then the second question is, it's a doubleheader with you and the men's team at Utah Valley when they host, I believe it's Sam Houston that night too. So can you give us an answer to those two questions?
Yeah, opening with Grand Canyon, I mean, they probably returned the most, where they probably of that top 4 seeds from last year, held on to the most people that were still eligible, like Amara Graham graduated, she was done. So, which is, she was a very good player, but got a couple good transfers, and they'll be good. They'll be really, really good. We've had some good battles with them, and it's funny, we've, tended to beat them at their place and they beat us at our place. So hopefully we can change that trend. But after Christmas games are always funny. No matter how much the girls say they go home and work out, that first practice, first game is a little rusty. So it'll definitely be a battle of who's stayed on top of things there, jumping right into conference pretty quickly. But I don't mind playing them first. It's a good, kind of, you can see where you're at right off the bat. And if you can get a win at home, it definitely could be a really valuable win, especially against a team as good as Grand Canyon. The double headers, we were talking about that with the men and with Jared, our AD, and Clint Berge, our SID. That's definitely different. That we haven't had that in conference since back in the Great West days when I was an assistant here. In fact, in those days, I'd help coach our game, and then I'd go hop on and do color on the radio.
Nice.
It was all hands on deck in the Great West days. But I think it'll be a different experience, but I think it'll be good. I think it'll be fun, especially our doubleheaders when school's in, be able to get some more people to our games and continue to build the campus community in that way. So there'll be some logistical headaches with shoot-arounds and some of that, but I think for the campus community, I think it's a good thing to get us here and get more people out of the games.
Daryl, you got any other questions for Dan as we close up this podcast episode?
Yeah, just one more regarding non-conference scheduling, and it seems like the WAC is picking up more games against the P5s than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
How big is that for the conference to say, look, we've competed against these P5s, we're picking up games against them. We occasionally, beat them like Chicago State did at Wisconsin last year. Just how good is that for the conference?
I think it's really good. Kids always want to play the best competition possible. And so when they can go look at your schedule and, point out, hey, we're playing these P5 teams, we're playing, Fresno State, who's always one of the best teams in the Mountain West. You're playing those conferences. They like that. They, to be able to say, hey, we're competing against those guys. But just for visibility of the conference, I think it's really good. Because you start to see, like you say, more people being right there to win games. I mean, last year, I guess it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I think there was a 4-day span last year where Stephen F. Austin was up on Texas A&M with a couple minutes to go. Like a day later, Cal Baptist was up on Oregon State with a couple minutes to go. And then the day after that, we were up on Utah, with a couple minutes to go. And obviously you got to win those games, but I think it shows where maybe a few years ago, those are just bye games where you get beat by 40 and you take your money. Now those are games we're competing in and have a chance to win. And I think it points to the better players, better coaches, and just where the league's headed. And so definitely makes the WAC a lot more fun, a lot more exciting. And as we keep competing in those games, I think you'll just see the league get better and better.
Dan, thanks for taking the time on the Straight Outta WAC podcast. Like I said, I'm a UVU alum, so I'm repping the Wolverine gear. And like I said, I hope Mark Madsen's watching this. And if he's not, you have to go across the hall and tell him that he needs to see what I was wearing on this podcast episode.
I just heard him blow his whistle to start practice. I'll go interrupt him and be like, hey, Kyle's got his flag up, make sure he knows. So
Utah Valley women's basketball head coach Dan Nielson, looking forward to the Wolverines. You open the season, November 7th against Park University in Orem, and then 4 days later you're at Utah again. So looking forward to it. Dan, thanks again.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you all next.
Thank you,
We'll
Dan.
see you all on the next episode of Straight Outta WAC Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Straight Outta WAC Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Remember to follow us on Twitter at WAC Hoops Digest and Facebook under WAC Hoops Digest for all your WAC Hoops news and information.